Hello, welcome to a Max spoilers for the Control DLC, the AWE DLC. I don't think we'll even spoil Foundation here because Foundation doesn't really have anything to do with it. Serial and I played and beat it. Ben and Jeff just want to hang out and ask questions about it, I guess.
We're very curious about it. And we should plug that if you want the podcast version of this discussion, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/MinnMax, 2 N's. And at that $5 tier, you unlock the podcast feed, which has the deepest dives, MinnMax interviews, all the podcast versions of those, early access to the MinnMax show, a lot of other fun stuff. Anyways, I want to know about this DLC, Kyle, because I'm curious about these interconnecting worlds. And this is the big Alan Wake DLC.
Yeah, so the big thing about it is like Alan Wake is there. You actually don't see him in game. You don't walk up to him as like a character model, but you get these like weird flashbacks in the Control Hotel where he is talking to his double, kind of, I guess is how you could say it. It's actually like a character named Thomas Zane who is like supposedly sort of kicked off all the events of Alan Wake. It gets very complicated, but all you really need to know is that like Thomas Zane was a writer before Alan Wake was a writer, and he's wrapped up in the darkness of Alan Wake and stuff like that. So you get a bit of dialogue between them, which is interesting.
So basically, like if you remember the bits where the director before you started talking and it kind of overlaid as you were playing it, like basically what was a video. Basically Alan Wake is those videos this time where it's kind of transparent on the screen and you're seeing him at a typewriter writing, like he narrates as if he was reading off his own book basically. And so that's the device they used to tell you all this stuff. And it's weird because you get to see like the actual actor who played Alan Wake in that, like just at his typewriter basically, which is a weird thing.
His hoodie, that he wears.
Wait, how does that work?
So it's like the live action model for Alan Wake basically.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an ethereal voice talking to Justin.
Yeah, it's like full motion video of him as you're moving around the space. If like it's like transparent on the screen the way it was in the base game of Control. The
idea of the events of Alan Wake and the darkness that he has to deal with, like that is separate from the sort of oddities that happen within the oldest house. I thought it was going to be kind of the same evil, but it is kind of treated as a separate thing that the oldest house is just like keeping an eye on. Like they're just trying to keep track of it and figure out what happened there. You know what I mean? So it still kind of separates them. It's not like Control is a secret sequel to Alan Wake.
Okay.
It's just that the Federal Bureau of Control has noticed that whatever's happening in that Washington town related to Alan Wake is something worth keeping an eye on. It is very strange and weird,
Are they building it to be like, oh, maybe these are going to overlap more in the future?
Well, we'll get... maybe. There's the other big sort of spoilery thing is there's a character from Alan Wake named Dr. Emil Hartman, who was a psychiatrist who, in Alan Wake, and help me out, Serial, I don't know how much you remember, but it seemed like he had somewhat of an understanding of the darkness. He wasn't just some passive character. Like he was trying to instigate things. He was kind of a bad guy who recognized that something was weird happening in this Washington town that he might be able to take control of. And he ended up kind of being a villain to Alan Wake over the course of the game. Not the main villain, not a major bad guy, but he was not a good guy that you interacted with. What happened was the oldest house basically kidnapped that character. The Federal Bureau of Control kidnapped Emil Hartman and brought him to the oldest house. And once they brought him there, he basically transformed into a monster. So you're actually chasing Emil Hartman through the course of the Alan Wake DLC through the oldest house, trying to defeat him.
I think that the reason they ended up bringing him over was because he was like, if you remember Alan Wake, a lot of like the darkness or whatever, Alan Wake ends up at the bottom of a lake, basically in that void area. So I think it's that Emil wanted to basically like figure out a way to venture into there to find the darkness and stuff. I think he like underwent some like massive like project to like unearth or excavate that lake, and eventually that's how he ends up corrupted. So there's like this huge like this dispute in like some of the notes between Investigations, which is where the DLC takes place, and Containment, because they're like, oh, he was supposed to go to Containment because our guys are trained to make sure that he does not get out. You sent him to Investigations because that's the department that found him, so of course he's going to break out and like cause havoc here.
I love the bureaucracy of the FBC. I think that's fun.
But like, long story short is that Emil Hartman is running rampant in the investigations section, and so Jesse gets the call to basically go here, and that's why you're learning about Alan Wake, so you can learn more about Emil, so you can stop him.
Yeah. And so all of that is cool and interesting and fun Easter eggs. But I think the thing that I mainly want to talk about, that I assume Story wants to talk about too, is at the end of the DLC, you get a cutscene, and it basically implies that something is bubbling up in Washington again. It's not going to surface for a few years, is almost literally how it's phrased. I could have the exact phrasing wrong.
I think it's featured, like whatever they get is future dated or something.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it looks like something's going to be happening there in a few years. And the implication is like very clearly Alan Wake 2 is in development to me. Like they're working on it. I remember Brian Vore wrote this is a weird tangent going, but Brian Vore wrote a review for the Kingdom Hearts 3DS game, and his headline was like, Kingdom Hearts 3 is coming, the game. Was sort of like that was like what Kingdom Hearts 3DS was.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what this DLC is. It's Alan Wake 2 is coming, the DLC. It's just like a confirmation to me that Remedy hasn't forgotten the characters, and a game is being worked on, but it's a few years out, and it will, take place inside the universe of Control.
Yeah.
Was that your read as well, Suriel, or was I just?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you see the Brightfall stuff, it feels like, oh, like what's gonna happen? Like it very much is like this weird. Okay, well, you've killed Emil, you've basically neutralized Emil Hartman. That's no longer a threat. But also keep in mind that there's this other thing that's gonna happen in Bright Falls. So I think there's some implication that it's possible. I don't know if this is the direction they end up going. That like it's gonna be like Alan Wake 2 featuring Jesse Faden or something. It's gonna be something like that, where they're going to bring in the Federal Bureau of Control. Because a lot of the thing, in Control, you hear a lot about these individual cases that the Bureau is dispatched to, and those end up just being notes of like, this tractor was like malicious and ended up killing people, so we had to send a team in to investigate. And like all those stories are fine, but like eventually you want to see one of those in action. And that's sort of where I'm leaning, is this is going to be one of those things where it's like, here's the Bureau functioning as the Bureau outside of this whole like building, basically.
Yeah, like an agent, and I think they even named a character whose name I didn't recognize, who would be dispatched to investigate it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that will be the tie to Control in a potential Alan Wake 2, is like Alan Wake will interact with I'm assuming it's going to be a very Lynch inspired investigator. Who will like help Alan Wake deal with what's happening in Bright Falls and Alan Wake 2.
Yeah. They could just make it a Deadly Premonition crossover as well. Just bring him in and just have all the big inspired games.
Give Alan Wake a skateboard.
Is there a world in which this would be a Control 2 and not an Alan Wake 2?
Or Control 2 Alan's Wake?
It felt separate from Jesse to me. Like I feel like Control's story is Jesse's story, and to me, and this is all just me reading maybe way too much into all this, was that just like whatever this Bright Falls extension is going to be, Jesse's not going to be dealing with it. At least, but that was my read, and I could be making a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, with her being the director, it makes sense for her to not be super involved with it, but we'll see where they end up going. But it does feel like, they're very strongly hinting that whatever they're doing next is Alan Wake related.
Do you feel
the fact that they time date it like years, like the fact that they said something's happening here, it's going to be a couple of years, but
it's this year fall 2020,
maybe delayed. We're not sure yet.
Q4.
So they teased.
So that's really exciting for me. That's like I love the idea of like that's Remedy's got that going on. I think they might even. I think they're turning into a multi-team studio at this point, right? If they're not already.
Yeah, they are. So there's news stories from last year. They're teasing multiple games in pre-production. Let's see.
And the Epic deal is obviously like lets them do basically whatever they want.
Well, that's the confusing thing. Yeah. So Sam Lake tweeted then when the Epic Games publishing deal came through in March, he said, "We're working on something exciting, something big with Epic Games as our publisher. We have incredible resources and full creative freedom. Thrilled about this opportunity. That said, for now, that's all I can tell you." So do you think Epic's going to be publishing and funding Alan Wake 2? Is that your best guess at this point?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, did they say new IP at all when they were teasing the future?
I don't believe so. So they said that they had two projects in the works back in 2019. The first is an unannounced game project that the report states is proceeding well, while the second game, codenamed Vanguard, is about to enter pre-production, and it's described as, quote, a game that combines long-term service-based multiplayer experiences with some of Remedy's unique game features.
Yeah. So I would guess that first one would be Alan Wake 2 before Control 2. Because they've been talking about doing another Alan Wake for years. I mean, Hansen, when we went to Finland for Quantum Break,
for the Carver Game Informer,
we asked him like, "Hey, will we ever see Alan Wake 2?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course, totally."
Right.
And I think he called Alan Wake his favorite of the Remedy games that they'd made at that point.
Yeah.
So
was this satisfying?
It seems like it's going to happen to me.
Was this crossover everything y'all were hoping for?
I was really happy.
Feels
with
like
it.
a prelude.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, full on like, hey, let's work together to solve this threat or whatever.
Yeah.
And it feels a little bit like a prelude in that they don't necessarily like, you know, defeat the issues at the heart of Alan Wake, right? They don't banish the darkness or whatever. It's just kind of like, hey, here's a thing that is self-contained and resolved, but we still need to go deal with what's happening in Bright Falls. So like a larger crossover, I think, would have Jesse Faden going to Bright Falls or something. And
I mean, even just like from a gameplay perspective, the focus on using light as like a gameplay element was it just like a fun thematic callback to Alan Wake. So I really enjoyed it. Like I was really happy with how it came back as someone who still thinks Alan Wake is probably his favorite Remedy game.
Right.
Like it was exciting and I really enjoyed it. It was nice to get those callbacks for sure.
Sweet. That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for playing that game, guys. And you can hear even more impressions on the new episode of the MinnMax Show podcast, just went up, where we talked even more spoiler-free impressions of what we think about the DLC, fun stuff like that. Be sure to check out Ana Diaz's new episode of Refreshed, her show every 2 weeks covering some of the interesting things in online internet culture. Jeff, anything you're dying to plug?
No.
Plug one thing, I dare you. Just try it.
Watch our Halo Deepest Dive.
Okay, but sincerely, like, give me like a sincere plug. Like, you actually want people to watch it, which I think you do in your heart of hearts.
They should absolutely watch it. It was a lot of fun to do, and I enjoyed going back to it, and I enjoyed our entire discussion, and it probably still is the best, most thorough discussion of Halo on the internet. And also the multiplayer discussion was really fun too.
I agree. Serial, what would you give that plug? Scale of 1 out of 10.
I would say it's a conflict of interest for me to review my friends' work.
All right, thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.